Hey everyone, welcome back to the Foundry by Forge College. I'm absolutely pumped to jump right into today's explainer with you. Now, if you hung out with us for the last lesson, you know we had a pretty great time wrestling with serialization and data validation using Borscht. We locked down exactly how to package our data safely. But today, today we're zooming out. We're looking at the big picture of how different pieces of a system actually talk to each other. So let's dive straight into it, applying compatibility assessment.
All right, picture this for a second. You've got two smart contracts. They're beautifully written. They both have 100% test coverage. In isolation, they are absolutely perfect. So you drop them both into your shiny new Web3 project, you wire them up, and boom, they just spontaneously combust. Transactions revert, state gets corrupted, or honestly, even worse, they fail completely silently. Why does that happen? Because being perfect on your own doesn't automatically mean you're compatible with your neighbor.
And that is exactly what we're fixing today. Our main goal here is to prevent these brittle, fragile integrations, and we do that by running a structured compatibility assessment. We want to catch those mismatches way before the contracts are ever fully integrated, let alone deployed to a testnet or mainnet. We're going to learn how to spot the friction points early. Trust me, this is going to save you countless hours of pulling your hair out over exploding contracts. So here is our literal safety inspection checklist for today. First, the circuit board model. Second, interface alignment. Third, state coupling. Fourth, transaction traces. And finally, number 5, mitigations. Let's get to it.
Step 1 on the checklist, the circuit board model. Let's build a solid mental model for this stuff.
So first things first, what are we actually doing here? A structured compatibility assessment is a repeatable, checklist-driven review that evaluates how two contract patterns behave when they're combined. Think of it like an essential diagnostic tool for intermediate Web3 developers. We aren't just skimming the code, we're running a highly systematic audit to see exactly how these components will interact when forced to live under the same roof.
To really visualize this, let's compare the contract integration process to a physical circuit board. Picture every contract pattern as a physical hardware device you're plugging into a motherboard. The interfaces, those are your hardware pins. The internal storage is the hidden wiring inside the actual device. And the transactions, those are the conductive traces running across the board, connecting the whole shebang together. If your pins are bent, if your wiring gets crossed, or your traces short circuit, the entire board fails. Which brings us right to step 2, interface alignment. We've got to check those pins. It is absolutely crucial to make sure your external interfaces line up properly. We don't want to drop any signals here. So first up, check your function's signatures. Do the names and parameter types match up exactly? Second, verify the return types. Does one contract expect a Boolean while the other returns literally nothing? And third, confirm your modifiers and events. Imagine downstream listeners are waiting for a specific event name, but your shiny new component fires a differently named event. Your whole off-chain infrastructure might just sit there completely deaf and confused.
All right, step 3, state coupling. Time to check the internal wiring.
This is where you really have to ask yourself, do my storage layouts or initializers overlap in upgradable contexts? Because honestly, this is a catastrophic risk. If you're using an upgradable proxy pattern, the implementation contract and the proxy must agree 100% on the positions of critical storage fields. Say contract A thinks slot 0 is just a harmless little counter, but contract B thinks slot 0 is the all-powerful admin address. Well, someone's balance is about to get overwritten by an admin address and your wiring is officially on fire.
Moving on to step 4, transaction traces. Checking the board traces.
Mismatched sequencing assumptions are the silent killers of smart contracts. Contract A might call contract B, totally expecting B to just do its job and return. But what if contract B was designed to make arbitrary external calls? What if it unexpectedly re-enters contract A before A has even finished updating its own state? Suddenly you've got exploding traces. You have to map out the typical transaction flows that touch both components. Make sure nobody is making assumptions about call ordering that the other component simply can't guarantee. And finally, step 5, mitigations. How do we actually fix these collisions? Okay, let's look at a real-world example that is frankly kind of hilarious, but mostly terrifying. Imagine you're integrating a legacy token component. It's old school, so it simply returns false when a transfer fails. But you plug it into a brand new possible system that assumes any failed transfer is going to explicitly revert the entire transaction. So what happens?
The token silently fails and returns false. The possible system completely ignores that return value, assumes everything went swimmingly, and just keeps executing. You end up with a state where funds were supposed to move, they actually didn't, but the system recorded that they did. Complete and utter chaos.
So how do we fix a mess like that? Well, we follow the golden rule of fixing contract collisions. It's beautifully stated right here. Prefer explicit normalization over hidden assumptions. If two modules disagree, you don't just hack one of them to pieces. No, you introduce the adapter pattern. You basically create a super thin, well-documented wrapper contract. It sits right between the two, calls that legacy token, checks if it returned false, and if it did, the adapter triggers the revert that the pausable system is expecting. It translates the behavior explicitly, which keeps both of your original contracts perfectly intact. Now, what about mitigating those internal wiring issues, the storage collisions we talked about earlier? You've got two main tools for this. First, explicit unstructured storage slots. Instead of letting Solidity automatically assign slots, you manually assign your variables to a highly unique randomized slot location. It's incredibly deliberate. Second, storage gaps. If you're building upgradable contracts, you just reserve a bunch of empty slots at the end of your contract. Think of an array like uint25650_gap. That way, if you add variables in the future, they won't accidentally overwrite the state of inherited contracts. Both of these methods brilliantly preserve your upgradability safety.
So this explainer sets the stage for you. But, theory only takes us so far. Your next step in this module is building an integrated example. And listen, it is incredibly important that you bring your assessment notes, your adapter stubs, and those storage maps right into that hands-on coding lesson. Taking a few minutes to prep that context will let you focus entirely on implementing and verifying the mitigation instead of scratching your head trying to remember how things are wired. All right, I'll leave you with this somewhat provocative question to chew on. Will your next integration plug in seamlessly, or is it going to short-circuit your entire system? By using that circuit board mental model we talked about and running your 3 passes, interface, storage, and sequencing, you actually get to decide the answer to that. I absolutely love breaking down these patterns, and there are so many more incredible courses and guided learning paths available through Forge College. If you want to really master these intermediate patterns and bulletproof your Web3 integrations, I highly encourage you to head over to forge.college to dive deeper. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. Keep assessing those interfaces, and I will see you in the next explainer.